Welcome to our notes on traversing arrays, 2D arrays I mean. So we can process two-dimensional arrays using all the same algorithms as we used with one-dimensional arrays. It's just usually we end up using two for loops, one for the rows and one for the columns. So, but we can do all the things like find the maximum value or add everything up and give the average, or all the things that we know how to do with an array. We can do the same things with 2D arrays. So I think I got it right here. May or may not be right here. It's in one of my windows. Oh, thank you. All right. Yeah. But it's probably over here that I really needed it. Okay. So I want you to see this is a standard loop for accessing all elements in an array. And I would encourage you to follow this protocol. Notice I'm using R for row, and you could use the word row if you want, but it's helpful if you keep it, like rather than use V and A and my name is one of the variables, Yasha. For this purpose, do R for row and C for columns, and then the protocol would be, remember the array.length, that tells you how many rows there are, but then the array element 0.length will tell you how many columns there are. Now, optionally, you could put an R here. I just want to call that out. Hopefully you see that's fine for this class, because I told you all of our arrays will be a rectangular. So it's not like the first row is going to have 10 items and the second row is going to have fewer items. That's why it's totally fine to just say, in this case, num square bracket 0. That'll give us the length, how many columns there are for all the rows. You don't have to be running it along row by row, but you'll see that in the AP classroom. They did it with the row variable there. But I usually just do a 0 because it's... So anyway, this is going to print an array with a little space between each item and then each row on its own line. And hopefully you can see it's just two for loops, one for the rows and one for the columns. And then we got this little print line that prints the element. Remember, we use square brackets for 2D arrays, and then a space. And then this prints a blank line at the end of every row. And when you get to the last column, it prints a blank line and goes back. So for today's programming assignments, you're going to do a lot of these. I mean, you can copy one you've already written if you want, and keep pasting it in. All right, you can do the same thing. So sometimes you really need to know the row and the column, so you want to do this sort of for loop, but you can also do the same thing with enhanced for loops. So here, you need to be able to understand this as well. And again, well, as you know, this video, I'm recording this, it'll be posted, on the web in 10 minutes. So if I go too fast and you miss copying something down completely, you can copy it down in a little bit. But I want to walk you through this. This is grabbing an entire row at a time, and it's important that we're doing an integer array. So we're getting the whole array, that's the first row, and we're getting it out of nums, and we're storing it in R. So for this enhanced for loop, R is actually an array, a one-dimensional array. So we get the whole row into this R thing, and then when we get C out of that, it's not an integer array, it's literally just an integer. So we're grabbing the items out of the integer array R, one item at a time, putting them into C. And so, I don't know, C might be the wrong variable to have used here, because we're not just printing like the column. I could have used N for number or something. But notice when you do an enhanced for loop, you don't have num, square bracket row, square bracket column. You just got it in variables. So this is easier if you can understand it. And but the other one's always fine. The confusing thing about this is this line here where we're making an integer, a one-dimensional integer array, which is just each row one at a time. But with practice, I think you will find that that's fine. Any questions on these two for loops?
One question.
Yeah.
So on the inside, the second for loop, if you did system.out.print len, would that mess up the whole?
That would just put one item on every. We'd have instead of an array, we'd have all the elements just printed, everyone on its own line.
So it wouldn't make it.
It wouldn't look pretty. Yeah. I'm going to go up here and print. I think I had set this up. Print array, and print. I want a blank line, and then I'm going to print array 2. Array. We'll run this and see what comes out. So yeah, they're both working fine. I'm just making sure that's what they look like. Okay. So you could use either one of these double for loops to like add up all the items in an array, a 2D array, or go through the whole 2D array and see what was the biggest value, or see if there were duplicates. You could do all those things that we've done before with something like this. Okay. Next, sometimes you want to just get one. You want to add all the items in a column. So if we go back to this printout, I might say I want to know what's the sum of, column 0, column 1, column 2, and I want to show you what that looks like. This is a method that does this. So add column, it returns an integer, public static int add column. It gets an integer array called nums, and it also receives a variable called column. That's the column we're looking for. I make a sum variable, make it 0, and then notice for this I don't need 2 for loops. I just need one to go through all the rows with that column that got sent over, right? So see, int r equals 0, r less than the number of rows, and then sum plus equals num. Now r is what's changing, so if we were doing this one, and I was saying I wanted column 2, then first r is 0, and we get the 5, and then r is 1, and we get the 9. And, doesn't matter if there were 100 rows, 1,000 rows, or 2 rows. The rows are what's changing. The column is staying the same for this one. Just wanted to show you that. Sometimes people think, oh, well, we're 2D arrays. Everything we do has to have 2 for loops. Well, you certainly don't need 2 for loops here because the column's not supposed to change. So column's just staying. So I'm going to call this... I'm going to call this function so we can see. For this one, I have to print it. Add column array, and let's add column 1. And we'll print it, and we'll see if it worked. So remember, column 0 is the first of the 1 and the 7. Column 1 is the 3 plus 9 equals 12. So we got it. So that's that. Questions? And then the last one I wanted to show you, if we were adding all the items in a row, similar concept. You need a for loop, just one for loop though, to go through all the columns. So here we're passed in a variable called row, and now because it helps me keep my bearings, I'm using the variable c instead of r, because c is for columns, and I'm using the array name square bracket 0 because that's how many columns there are. And then we add everything up and return the value, and that's that. So that's the